Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to The Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your host and your guide along the way. And not long ago, I jumped on a plane, and the whole team from The Way of the Showman, which is me, moved our recording studio to Stockholm, Sweden, as has happened once before. And the reason for that is that this is where we can find Jay Gilligan, the official co-host of this here show. And as you see, we have, for those of you who are looking up and down on iTunes or Spotify, you will be able to see that it has its own sort of episode art. That when you scroll down, you can easily see if you are coming from the juggling community, which I know there's a lot of you. If you're coming from the juggling community and you want to hear all the stuff that Jay has to say about art and life in conversation with me, you can easily find it. And if you are here for Jay Gilligan and you're also here for myself, then you're in for a treat. Because this episode is, in one way, about Cirque du Soleil. And specifically about Cirque du Soleil's production of Mystère, a show that opened in 1993 in Las Vegas and basically made the entire Las Vegas, turned it upside down. Every show, every casino needed a Cirque du Soleil show, and actually that might even have been in the works, but Jay is going to tell you more about that in a minute. But really, this is also a show very much about Jay Gilligan, about his obsessive nature, about the way that how deeply he gets into things. And those of you who have seen Jay juggle or have seen his YouTube channel with its thousands of hours of juggling exploration, not insignificant, not just your everyday I'm having a little jam, but serious explorations where he gets jugglers from all over the world to have research labs and exploring how far can we push the art of juggling and push into new props, and what does improvisation actually mean within juggling. So intimidating, but the reason why he has the following that he does within the juggling community in particular is, of course, because of his inquisitive and unwavering interest in shows. Something that also could be called an obsession. And this is, of course, for those astute listeners who remember back to our first talks about reflex, obsession was one of the words that we bandied about. So, without further ado, let's explore Mystère with Jay Gilligan. So finally, after, it happens rarely, but we are in the same place at the same time in an actual real-life room.
Are we? We're not holograms, or?
Not that I know of. If that case, then you got a hologram going all the way from your flat where I slept in your son's bed to coming here to your studio. And I'm really excited. I'm here with Jay Gilligan in the flesh. And I have been wanting for a long time to talk to you about Cirque du Soleil, but specifically talk about Cirque du Soleil's production called Mystère.
Yeah, I think I know why you want to talk to me about that.
Yeah, good.
Because I've seen that show 84 times now.
So you've seen it live in the theater 84 times?
Yeah, because if you want to talk about seeing it, on a video, we have to add a few more hundred numbers to that total.
And to be fair, it was... I knew that you liked Mystère, and I probably have heard sometime that you had watched it many times or whatever. But as it is with those things, it's almost like in my youth, I also watched movies many times or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was not fully clued up to the fact that how strongly this was going on right now at the moment. And when I was playing Mad Apple in New York, in Las Vegas, and you came to stay.
Yeah.
And on the first night after you arrived, when I was, I think, doing shows, you went to Mystère to see the show.
Yeah.
But then you saw it twice.
Yeah.
So you got off the plane, put your family to bed, went and saw the show twice in a row.
Yeah, because it played twice that night.
Yeah.
Why would you just go see it one time? It's playing in the city you're in.
Yeah, well, so that is just a beautiful question. But I'm going, well, it played twice, so of course I had to see it twice. Why would you not? And I go, well, for one, it's expensive, and two, you had just seen it immediately beforehand. So I would like to delve into that. But that, I think, becomes the second question. The first question, to set it up for all of our fellow travelers out there, is what Mystère is. So yeah, how about you start by, before we go into maybe what Mystère actually is and how it ended up in Las Vegas and all that, but just talking about how did you hear about Mystère first? What was your first sort of?
Yeah, I mean that's a great starting point, because I have kind of a special connection with the show. I was working with Patrick McGuire. We had a duo juggling act. We were both teenagers, so we had a little duet we had made, and we were just kind of doing our first performances together when there was this rumor going around that Michael Motion was casting some jugglers for a piece he was going to make for Cirque du Soleil, and Cirque du Soleil had been kind of courting Michael for years to try to get him into their productions in various forms. I mean, he was on their radar for a long time, obviously. Like, they knew what was going on in North America, and Michael was performing and, of course, doing this fantastic kind of circus stuff. And you could also maybe even say that Michael was in that same kind of style, or at least in that direction, right?
Michael Motion doing the triangle, where he bounces the balls in the triangle, that could absolutely be like a feature act in any of those
and that's exactly,
Golden Age Cirque du Soleil
That's
shows.
exactly what Cirque du Soleil wanted, right? And so for years, it just never worked out. That's maybe another whole podcast of why that, how that journey went. But basically, at the end of the day, they finally got him to make a piece for this new creation, Mystère, that was going to be in Vegas. And so they were looking for jugglers. And of course, by that time, I was already obsessed with Cirque du Soleil, because that's of the generation I am, of the time.
And what time is this?
No, exactly. So I was just going to say that I was kind of starting off into circus and performing at the kind of quote unquote right time with the Cirque du Soleil's rise, which is a whole, again, other story we won't go so deep into, but we can say late 80s, early 90s, especially. So my first quote unquote show, everybody has like their first show as the entry point into maybe the larger world of circus, and mine was Nouvelle Experience. It's so funny to me, people who are younger than me who are like, Quidam was the first one, and whatever, Curios was the first one, or especially, actually after Quidam and after La Nuba and the quote unquote the golden era of Cirque, which is in my mind defined by a core creative team. Yeah. And that's why it's the golden era, because it was more or less the same creative team who made all these kind of iconic shows. And
so that's from Nouvelle Experience. So it's like we reinvent Circus, which was the first show they did to get the name and everything, and then there was the first actual production that is in the style of Cirque du Soleil. Or this could be a very we can find people who want to have a very long conversation about all those details. But now you're just stuck with me, and so you can't. So I'll give my point of view. But my point of view, and we hope that somebody says, "Let me set the story straight," and then you can come and do it.
But my point of I know a bunch of different points of view around it. But my take on it is that Nouvelle Experience was the first show where they came up with their iconic kind of stage design, which was the Michel Crete who made the set designs. And they combined in Nouvelle Experience the traditional proscenium arch stage, which was the platform in the back, they combined it with the circus ring, which was the 270-degree thrust stage. Yeah. Right. So Nouvelle was the first show they did where that was a physicalization of this philosophy of theirs, which was Franco Dragón, of combining theater and circus. So they literally took this idea of combining theater, which was the theater stage. So that's your frontal viewing platform, right?
With the theater is in the end, everybody sits in classic
theater stage,
classic theater,
right?
Yeah.
But then the circus ring, which was in one way known as a 360-degree stage.
Yeah.
So they mashed up those two literal physical performing spaces, and Nouvelle Experience was the first expression of that set design kind of philosophical idea. And that arc lasted until La Nuba was the last production of the golden era of that team.
Yeah, right.
And one funny thing though is, so like I say, I have Nouvelle Experience as my kind of hallmark moment of like entry into this world, and it was made this impression on me.
Saltimbanco for me. But yeah.
Okay, Saltimbanco for you, perfect. Yeah. But after you get past like Quidam, people aren't really like, oh, La Nuba was my first experience, because after Quidam, we start to have maybe not yet, but other companies coming up. I mean, for the new generation. So I know it's well after the golden era. But for example, Traces by Seven Fingers, there's so many people, I call them kids, but of course they're adults now. But back in the day, there's so many kids who were like, oh, Traces was the first thing that I saw. And it's kind of funny to see that arc then of the circus culture in the world, where Cirque du Soleil had this golden era, and then it fell off in many different ways, which, again,
we don't even have to go into there.
But
we're focusing on
other companies came, right, like Seven Fingers,
or whatever.
and then that became the kind of touchstone or the cultural moment then. And there's another really funny, I was before this phenomena happened, but one really strong impression came because there was a TV network in America called Bravo, and they started showing all the films of Cirque du Soleil at a certain point. And that was...
The actual show is...
Yeah, I mean, because, Soleil was filming their shows.
I had completely forgotten this, but I believe my first actual encounter with them was that some of those might have been shown in Norway too.
Sure. No, because Soleil was filming all the shows. They were releasing and selling VHS tapes at first, and then later on DVDs.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they were also selling those shows as TV programs to different networks around the world.
Yeah.
And so, like Arte TV and Europe and stuff. But in America, which was their main market at the time, this Bravo network kind of showed their programs on a loop almost.
Oh, wow.
And it influenced a whole generation or more of circus people. And I was already into it before that phenomena, but that phenomena certainly helped cement it into my life, that you had this access to that kind of...
Sometimes when you only see it live or you do it, then it's this one, like you go, oh, it's a special thing, that's one, but by the time it starts to go on a loop with several shows in a row or whatever, it's a phenomena that becomes like mythical or something when it's on TV like that. This is a cultural phenomena that is bigger than the one show that I saw.
We're going to dive into this a lot more later on, I think, now in this conversation. But also to remember, back then when Bravo was broadcasting these performances, this is before the internet. You couldn't get video on demand. You couldn't find... I mean, of course, you could buy the VHS tape from Cirque du Soleil store on, or at a show. You can maybe buy a DVD or something later on.
Was there a Cirque du Soleil store?
Yeah, well, online.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, okay.
Right, so at some point it comes online when the internet starts. Yeah. But back then, you would get the VHS tape from a show.
Yeah.
And from the touring, the merch tent or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I bought a pocket watch.
Yeah.
With Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah.
When I saw Saltimbanco
in
Belgium in 2007.
I have that pocket watch, yeah. It's a great piece of merch.
It blew my mind that they had all these different things.
It's René Bazinet on the pocket watch, It's like,
incredible.
The Baron character, René Bazinet. But so then, so they're holding this auditions for performers for Michael Motion's piece. And we didn't know it was for Mystère. We only knew, of course, it was for Cirque du Soleil. This is months before the show opened, obviously. I mean, this is in the creation, they're casting for the show. And so what I was going to get to then is, because I was already obsessed with Soleil, with my first experience was with Nouvelle Experience, and I'd seen the show live. That eventually, that's also wrapped up with Mystère history there. But I so I was working with Patrick McGuire, and he got hired to do this creation with Micromotion. And by that time, of course, I was also really dreaming about being in, as everybody I knew at the time was kind of like, oh, I want to be in Cirque du Soleil. Like, that's a thing I would like to do. It was kind of the top of the game and kind of the thing you wanted to do in one way. If you weren't, in a certain direction, if you're, like, how to describe, I mean, Cirque du Soleil did represent that kind of abstract art expression, it was quote unquote art. I mean, it was whatever, it was abstract, and it was in a certain...
They did a huge thing towards making circus art.
Yeah.
People go look at traditional circus, and a lot of people just go, well, it's for children. It's a family thing, whatever. But Cirque du Soleil, you could go there with your date or with a group of adults, and it was like... It was fine for kids, but it was not pandering to... It was not a kid's show. It was okay for children, not on... Yeah.
It was still just like high culture, right?
Yeah,
and they were kind of selling it like the same thing. You go see a symphony, you might go see Cirque du Soleil, and then it was kind of trying to elevate the culture. And I think part of that journey, of course, too, was the whole crux of how Soleil started to, when they really started to climb up into the public consciousness, was the whole, it's the animal-free circus. That was the first kind of step of how to differentiate themselves from Ringling Brothers, for example, and say, well, we're animal-free. And part of that, I think that idea of being animal-free was then to focus on the humans, right? And then that human is this kind of to elevate the culture and to kind of boost it up and have this veneer of like,
respectability or whatever.
Yeah.
Like has happened with other art forms, like theater, where it used to be booths in the front where you could close the curtains. So the prostitutes who were working every day at the same theater, you're like basically being employed. You go around and you service the clients, and it was it's not a nice, it was not a family affair. And now theater is different, even if it was high and lofty, but
and the same thing for classical music, right? You used to go to a classical music show, or you go to a music show, a concert. It wasn't classical music then, but people were rowdy. They would scream and yell, and they would say, repeat that part, if people, they would, if they clapped enough, the orchestra would play that part again. And now we have the culture. You go to a symphony, and there's cough drops in a bowl in the lobby because how dare you cough once during the fifth movement or whatever of the symphony, right? So we've had that journey on a lot of different art forms.
Yeah. We don't have to delve too much deep into that, but I have some info on the beginning of that too, of how like Mozart was ahead of his time, because there wasn't really paid concerts watched by the people. It was just being done in courts, so you had to be paid by the church or a court to be a composer in that kind of way. And that some of these other composers that came a bit after that, and that's why he was making these musicals. Not musicals, operas or whatever, but like a bit more bawdy, his style or whatever.
Right.
To sell tickets. He was working in these sort of more burlesque kind of theaters, getting the actual real public who was having screaming and carrying on, like you say. That was like that market was just embryonic, and concerts as we think of it didn't quite exist. But anyway.
No, that's great. So then Patrick McGuire, he gets hired into this creation, into this production, and of course I'm young. I'm a teenager, so I'm kind of a punk, and I'm a little bit stupid because I'm a teenager, and of course I get like, on one hand, jealous that I also wasn't hired or whatever that means, though it wasn't ever. I was never in contention for that part, so it wasn't like I was all, oh man, we both auditioned and he got the part and I didn't. But it was more just, I was more angry that he kind of got poached, we were working on this duo together, and it was kind of just starting to take off, and then suddenly he got hired by this big company. And I was a little bit like, oh man, that's not so fun.
You're poaching my talent.
Yeah, I was like,
I've been grooming this guy to be the next...
But at the same time, Micromotion was already my favorite juggler back then, and I knew what an opportunity it was for Pat to go work with Michael and Cirque du Soleil. So for me, it was just top of the top of the top. You couldn't get you couldn't mash up a better meeting of two, Micromotion and Cirque du Soleil, and then Pat got to work with them. And so for me, that would be that's just heaven.
Yeah, and you're going, you're an asshole for leaving, but of course you have to leave, even if it
Well, I was never mad at. I was never mad at Pat.
No.
I was more mad. I was more mad at Soleil that they had taken him away.
Yeah.
But so that was kind of so that was like a real personal connection to that creation and that show and that journey, which already before he was hired, I was already into Michael and Soleil. So like, of course, I had a personal connection into that process.
Juggling entrance through the fact that your favorite juggler, Michael Motion, was making a piece, which was a
finally
for them, and then you know somebody who now is a part of the creation at least, and then you have personally invested with complex emotions already.
Yeah, and also that it affected my life personally. And
That's what I mean with complex emotions. Is like you go, I know of this show. I'm a little bit angry, but I'm also intrigued, and I would have loved to be asked, or like it's all that sort of.
And so so that's kind of my really personal connection with the show. And then I went to visit Pat in Vegas a couple times.
So they were doing creation in Vegas?
Well, no, they did a lot of the creation in Montreal because this was the first time they were doing a custom-built theater for the show. And so, of course, that took a long time. So there wasn't any... I mean, of course, they were doing some workshops in Vegas, like in a rehearsal space, rented whatever, warehouse space or something. But most of it's taking place in Montreal. And there's a couple funny stories about that. And pretty much everything I know about Mystère is memories I have of what Patrick told me.
Yeah, right.
So whether that's so now you have two.
But we're not getting.
But we have two layers of removal there, right?
In this interview, in this conversation, we are not looking for any kind of objective truth.
Okay,
we're not letting the truth get in the way of a good yarn, and these
but just
are
letting you know
real stories that were told to you by someone that was there, and then it's been,
as far as I remember,
tuned in your head over the last 20 years.
So one good story of creating the show in Montreal and then moving finally into the theater space once it was built in Vegas. So Steve Wynn owned Treasure Island at the time, and he was building this new casino called Treasure Island. Now they've branded as TI. So in case we say TI later on in this conversation, it's Treasure Island. But a really fun moment was in Canada, they used the metric measurement system. And in America, I guess they're using the imperial, feet and inches or whatever. And so, as the story goes that I heard, the finale of Mystère when it opened was a flying trapeze act.
Oh.
Do you see where this is going?
I see where this is going.
So they built a flying trapeze rig in Montreal, and they measured it, and it was 33 centimeters from this distance to this distance. And then when they got to Vegas, it was 33 inches or something like this. I mean, it was they used
unusable.
They used a numerical conversion.
Yeah, so they were just everything that they had was 2.5 times as big as it should have been,
or something like this.
Yeah, but
there was some mistake like this.
Yeah,
because it wasn't.
It's a mistake that we see in Spinal Tap. When they make the Stonehenge, because there's only one dot, which means inches. 2 dots means feet.
Yeah.
So they get a mini Stonehenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Show.
No. So I don't think the trapeze rig was so big that when you first looked at it, you're just like, oh, this is ridiculous, like in Spinal Tap, right?
Yeah.
But it was to the point where they apparently, again, what Pat had told me was they go to do their first training of the swinging pass, and then they go to do the jump, and they're just like feet away from each other on the catch. And they're just like, wait, this is so weird. We're nailing this stuff up in Montreal, and now we're down here, and it doesn't work. And then somebody had found some sort of mathematical error, apparently on the conversion of the units of measurement.
But it could have been on anything, because if the wires are too long for it, so
exactly,
and it hasn't been completely 100% uniformly translated.
Right.
So
something was wrong.
One part or one section is left in.
But the point being just that, they definitely weren't rehearsing in Vegas. Because they were still building the theater, which again is such a powerful, for me, it's such a powerful moment because it was the first time that Cirque du Soleil had a custom-built theater for one of their productions, which these days is still pretty unique, but it's definitely not unheard of. I mean, now we have like Hoya and the Mexico Dinner Theater. It's its own custom space, and they're just opening up another one down there, and they're opening all these shows in custom spaces these days. So it's not like well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But this
it's not. It's crazy for people like you and me.
Yeah, we make a new show
venue.
and we don't make a new building.
Yeah,
yeah.
We just do the same show in the corner of the room.
And
but for them, this was the start of something big, and it was also which is significant.
It was the start of something new, and they didn't know if it would be big yet.
No, no, we know in the benefit of hindsight that this was something big.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there still is multiple shows, and at that point there was none. But I also heard somebody say on a voice message to me when I said they wanted to talk about this, mention that they had done some shows in a car park.
Yeah, so
it wasn't the very first Cirque show in Vegas.
No, exactly. And this is a whole story which I only have a little bit of it in my brain. It's pretty accessible on there's a bunch of podcasts. If you have the time, you should really listen to the Franco Dragón, Chris Angel interview that they did during the pandemic. It's one of the best interviews I've ever heard from both of them. And there's a lot of Cirque du Soleil lore and process that comes out during that interview.
Wow.
But basically what happened was, Soleil had been courting different people in Vegas different people in Vegas had been like kind of checking out Soleil over the years when they started to pop off in the late 80s. And it all comes down to their show in LA. That was a make or break moment for Soleil, which is a whole other crazy story. That this guy named Tom basically brought Soleil to LA and was just like, well, we can't pay you any money, but we can bring you here and kind of give you an opportunity. And it was make or break. They spent all their money on one-way tickets to LA. The Soleil did from Montreal. And they're just like, well, this is it. Either we go big or we go home, literally. Like either the company will pop off or it will close. And that was the gamble. This is the famous gamble, and it paid off. And so because of that success from this one festival in LA, of course it caught the attention of people in Vegas who were also trying to sniff out new ways to make money and new forms. And also Vegas was transforming at the time too. They were starting to open places like Treasure Island, which is like a pirate themed. They were trying to make it more family friendly, more because it used to just be Vegas was just built on gambling, right? Mm-hmm. And like kind of all the vices, of whatever. And so then Vegas wanted to become a more well-rounded family destination or get new clientele in. So Soleil pops off in LA. Vegas kind of takes note. Oh, maybe you should come here. Maybe you could do a show here. So they were in the talks for a while with different people. They were going to do originally a show at Caesar's Palace. They were going to do a production there. And so that didn't pan out. But what happened was Steve Wynn brought Nouvelle Experience to the parking lot of the Mirage. And so that's where I actually finally saw Nouvelle Experience in person.
And they set that up so with the big top.
Yep.
They
had a blue and gold big top.
Wow.
Sorry, blue. White and gold. It was a white and gold big top, and then it was like a test. It was like a kind of a dry run of like would Cirque du Soleil sell tickets in Vegas?
Because at the time, this is also kind of interesting. When I was reading in a 20-year Jubilee book, which is now 20 years old, it just said as well that part of the significance of them opening there and doing that was that there wasn't really circus in Vegas at that time, and in fact there wasn't really entertainment of that kind, and that earlier, but I don't know when, but Siegfried and Roy, the fact that they opened changed the style from a kind of Lido was it for Bergère?
Yeah, Faldis Bergère,
yeah, like what we think
Jubilee or something, maybe
which
was later,
dancing girls and feather headdresses and
big
all
band,
that. Big band, and so that was the style a lot. Then we had the Rat Pack with Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr.
Exactly,
that sort of stuff, and the fact that
so Siegfried and Roy, they made the first big production show of like the new. They kind of innovated that era of just like big, huge production values of big special effects,
live cats, and tigers and panthers and all this sort of stuff, and big illusions. And
it was just I think so. From what I understand, which isn't very far, but the Siegfried and Roy production was just bigger than anything that had ever come before it. Just more ambitious and just more spectacular, and kind of ushered in this new era of mega spectacular Vegas show that was this huge production thing that was...
Which is totally fascinating because we think of Frank Sinatra and that now, and Sammy Davis Jr., but it literally was just a big stage with two dudes going around telling jokes and singing songs and stuff, which
Right.
to me is and that, but would just sell tickets like hotcakes or whatever, if they were given for free at that point. It's just about the gambling one. But it's so like lo-fi in terms of what the production offered, or so it was the charismatic single person.
Yes, exactly.
Or
and then Siegfried and Roy turned it more into a spectacle.
Yeah.
Right. And then so then it was like, but you're right. There wasn't Circus in Vegas then in that way, and so then they did Nouvelle Experience in the Mirage parking lot, and then that was kind of proof of concept of like, oh yeah, we can make money doing this, and that's when
did that go well?
Yeah, that was like a test, and then they saw like, oh yeah, people are buying tickets to go see this thing, so we need to have this here now.
Yeah, well.
And then the thing was, well, I'm making this new casino, Treasure Island, so I want to have a custom-made show into my custom-made casino, which in my mind was, it was a real risk. It was a complete unknown. It was just a gamble. I mean, it's Vegas, and literally, it's just gambling of like, is this going to work or not? Even though Nouvelle Experience had done okay, they didn't know if a permanent, like, could it, nobody knew, Frodo. It's so weird today. When we go to Vegas, you're like, oh yeah, O's been there 25 years, and now Mystère's been there 31 years, and you kind of get blasé about that idea. Can you imagine back in 1992 when they're building the casino and they're just like, we're going to put it was the first permanent resident Cirque du Soleil show anywhere. They didn't know if it was going to work. That's right.
It's become such an institution for those of us who have been to Vegas, but the general public of the world, here in Stockholm, maybe it's a little bit different because you do actually have a circus building that's called that, at least.
Right.
It's like there was a time when one built a building for circus and that could actually see circus in it. But that is hundreds of years ago, or at least 100 years ago. So it's not common anywhere in the world to build stages that has circus in it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. The flip side of that too is you have to remember back in 1992. You didn't make a show that played more than like 2 years. Even to do a show for 2 years long was wacky. From my world, just to say, you would never make a show and think, oh, this is gonna last for 10 years. That was only reserved for like Cats or Phantom of the Opera or other Broadway shows that would have like a long run of for years long. Even Cirque du Soleil back then, they were kind of on a 2-year cycle of like, well, we make a new show, we tour North America, do that for a couple of years, and we got to make the new show again to tour North America again.
Which is sort of what we're talking about all the time, like reinventing yourself, because you're playing in the same market around where you live, or someone, and then you go, well, I to play the places where I'm already big, or at least they've seen me, I got to go back to the same places. So you got to come with a new show.
So imagine that's kind of the iteration you're on of your timeline, and now you're building a permanent venue. That a show, and they, when Mystère was going to open, they didn't know, would it last a year? Would it last 2 years?
Yeah.
And so, the first thing, so they signed a 10-year contract at first, which was just insane. It was just crazy. Like, who would ever think this could last 10 years there? And in fact, in that first contract with the casino, Mystère had the clause that, Cirque du Soleil had the clause that they had to change 10% of the show each year. And then the theory being it wouldn't be the same 10% of the show that changed, but rather different 10% of the show changed, so that they knew, because again, they're on this cycle of like, well, we need to reinvent what we're doing to keep getting the ticket sales. So ostensibly over 10 years, it'd be a different show by the end of the 10 year, right? Like, so every year they change like one little part of it. And then by the end of 10 years though, it's a completely different show.
Yeah.
That didn't end up happening because it became a huge success. And then, of course, the show mutated and changed, but they didn't feel that pressure anymore from the market that they were imagining, that they had to keep reinventing it or whatever.
It's been a long time, if it ever has been, a time when circus was like kind of Hamlet or Midsummer Night's Dream. Well, everyone knows the story of Hamlet, so we're adding a new scene every year to get people excited. That sounds idiotic. But with circus, that is the case. When I joined La Clique, and we did the first season 2006, the first season I did, it was never certain that I was invited to the next place.
Oh, right.
They played a couple of different places, and when they came back to Melbourne, well, you've already played here. So, and it was kind of spoken that you'll get a couple of little seasons or whatever. And as happened with Mystère, happened with La Clique, where Brett Haylock and David Bates realized that the magic of that show wasn't just everything around it. There was also a core cast that became like that's solidified over those first few years, and a lot of us then, that original group, stayed in that show for a decade or more. So it was also the producers of the creators of it, like with these guys in Vegas. You realize that you have something where you can change certain things around, like we'll talk about, of course, when you have a vision of a show and you've made it. Sometimes people are injured, sometimes things happen and certain people are out. But you have enough of it to be the core of it, but that thing that doesn't actually have to change. That person doesn't need to come out and do a different act or a different thing, because that's partly why they come there. It's nice that there's some difference, but not really. And that's unusual in Circus, that then a show plays for 10 years, that's 12 years or whatever that we did, or 31 years.
Can you imagine being in the creation 31 years ago and a decision you made back then? Like imagine me and you right now, we make a show and we're just like, oh, Frodo, maybe you come over here and you take my hat. And then 31 years later, you're still coming over and taking my hat or whatever. It's like...
And the generation of, at least of circus performers, go, this is basically one of those things where Frodo goes and gets the hat.
Yeah.
This is what we want to create in our show.
Right.
Because you know how they do that chemistry that happens there, and the joke or the beauty, poetic or whatever it was that moment was.
Yeah.
That was often, as we know in creation, as much as you look at something like that and you go, I could not imagine that.
Yeah.
But then you go down to it, and it literally was those two artists and
it's
only looking at it, and he grabs the hat and goes, that's nice, do that one more time, do it one more time, and now that becomes
iconic,
and it becomes iconic because it's made 10 shows
it's Paul McCartney. When Paul McCartney went to see the Beatles' Love Show by Cirque du Soleil in Vegas, there's a moment in the documentary when he leans over to Ringo and he says, oh, it's so funny, this song that they're playing right now, I wrote it on the back of a napkin in a bar, I scribbled out some words, and now look what it has become.
Yeah.
It became manifested in this multi-million dollar production in Vegas, and he's just like, the smallest beginnings can...
And if you haven't seen it already, the Beatles documentary...
I've seen it,
Get Back.
Yeah.
Where I had this extraordinary experience of seeing Sir McCartney sitting there at the piano and not knowing the words to Let It Be. And he doesn't know it because he hasn't made it.
Yeah.
But I can hear when he's going in the right direction, and I can hear when he's making a mistake. And he's bringing out a song that's... You can't use it in a show because it's too cheesy, or it's too... can't put Let It Be. Of course, when the situation is right, then that song comes on, and maybe that becomes... And it just lifts the roof off like a cliche. Cliche has become... It's been said so much because it's such a powerful emotion, and when the cliche comes alive again... the girl finally wants the boy in the end of, or fails to in the end of Romeo and Juliet or whatever. Then that thing, when that's told authentically, then it's the greatest story ever told. But it's the, but anyway, but him not knowing it as well. But all his weird choices being taken, and now it's in the show with Cirque du Soleil.
Well, so we're kind of jumping into like this. So far, a little bit of the business side of like, wow, what a crazy risk. We're going to solidify and concretize this show. We don't know if it's going to sell tickets, but we're going to build its own space, and we're going to double down on this bet, and we're going to take this risk. And from a business side.
And you're also saying, like, business-wise, to show this, that they don't... that apparently backstage areas and stuff for warming up and all that for the artists are not particularly well thought out or developed at this show, because... In a sense, the people, the creators of the show and the space are still hedging their bets.
Yeah, because
if this fails.
Often now, I think they even still do it today, where if you're going to build a show space, for example, you don't know if that show is going to work or not.
Yeah.
So let's say it fails. Well, maybe it would be better to think ahead. And if it did fail, we could already build into the architecture now certain the way that it's built, that it could be transformed easily into another type of venue.
Yeah.
So, for example, instead of building, a bunch of hidden huge training rooms and dressing rooms and stuff, which would be complete waste if this show fails. So for example, on Mystère, that's why they don't really have any dressing room. I mean, it's very, very small. The training room is very, very small. There's really no backstage space in Mystère. A lot of the props in Mystère during the show and after the shows and stuff, they're suspended in the air on ropes because there's no place to put them on the ground.
Wow.
Like they have to lift them up on ropes to have enough space backstage to maneuver the whole show, because the architecture was like, well, we need a stage, we need some seats. Beyond that, like, we're not going to go crazy
we're not
here.
Gonna invest more than X amount of square meters.
Which is the same thing for Absinthe, by the way, which has been there for 9, 10, how many years now? And the dressing room is in the parking lot. I mean, the dressing room is the parking garage.
You literally go into the parking garage.
Yeah.
Some of the parking has been made into temporary.
Yeah, temporary for 10 years.
Yeah.
Because when Absinthe first opened there, it was supposed to be there for 3 months or something.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, it keeps getting extended and keeps getting extended. And so then eventually, though, 10 years later, you're still in the parking garage.
But when you got me, through your friend, got me into the Michael Jackson show, and they actually said hello to the MJ1, their backstage is also not amazing.
Okay, sure. Oh, that's the easy story, though.
Oh, yeah?
That's because MJ1 Theater was not built for MJ1.
Okay.
Before that, it was Mamma Mia. Before that, it was Lion King, etc.
And they don't warm up in the way that jugglers and that...
I don't know. Or it was also like...
I mean, if you're doing Mamma Mia, no one is needing to hang on a trapeze.
No, but
it needs space.
But it could also be like, hey, let's open Mamma Mia, let's build a theater. I don't know if this is going to last. It could be the same. It could be the same thing too.
Maybe it's not actually good for anybody because it's a generalized utility space.
But hey, you want to see a nice backstage? Go to Ka. So by the time when Ka came around in like the mid 2000s, they knew that Mystère was popping off. So they're just like, oh yeah, this is gonna work. We're doubling down on this Ka thing, and so their backstage is crazy. It's like, it's so much room. There's this rec room, and there's the training room, and there's the dressing rooms, and the rigging rooms, and it's massive. So like the later Cirque du Soleil shows that got custom built theaters, like and Ka, for example, they have nice backstages.
Yeah.
But so MJ1, it was a repurposed theater.
Yeah.
And then also, but with Mystère, when they originally built it, they're just like, it's already costing us enough money.
Yeah, we haven't, can't afford.
And also that the architectural plans, they just surfaced like a couple months ago on the internet. You could find the drawings of what was going to happen to the Mystère theater when it failed. Like they already had, the architects had already drawn up Plan B and a contingency plan, just how they were going to transform it into...
not even in a negative way of if it failed, but when after a year or two and the ticket sales dropped off like one would expect to happen because everyone had seen it or whatever, which obviously then 30 years later didn't turn out. People kept coming back and back. Or not necessarily coming back, but new people keep finding it and seeing.
Tickets kept being sold.
The mystery of it all.
Well, so that's kind of we could say the business side of the risk of the whole thing. But then on top of that, the thing that I still to this day can't kind of get over or comprehend or resolve or something is the artistic risk that everybody took.
So this is the crux of it. Because I have seen Nouvelle Experience, but I haven't got any clear image of that in my mind. But how did this develop into the shows of Mystère? Then I don't have the full timeline here of how it went. But when I watched Mystère after having seen other shows, I'd seen O beforehand, and O is arguably the most extraordinarily developed of the Cirque imagery. I remember someone saying, when you watch it, just keep in mind, don't try to sort of follow the story and be irritated that you don't get it.
Right.
Because everything is going on at the same time, and each character might have a thread or so, but you might just watch it and take it in as just a large dream and grab from it what you can or whatever.
Yeah.
So by that point, it had become so fully developed.
Right.
This artistic image that you talk about now that we saw, but Nouvelle Experience, it develops, and it's interesting then to see when I saw then Mystère, how I could see more what I think of as traditional circus, or
I get
the
you.
roots of circus.
I see what you're saying.
Still see that.
I see what you're saying.
In the way that the show is built up, and
Right.
it felt really awesome for me to go and go, oh my God, here it is, and I could see the timeline almost of how it
Yep.
stretched into
Yeah.
some of these other shows. So Mystère is at this sort of crucible of of. So maybe we'd just like sketch out some of those things, or like the artistic theme.
Well, I think, absolutely, we can do that. And I think what you're bringing up right...
Team, I meant.
Yeah, the team, yeah. But what you're hinting, I mean, what you're touching on is this kind of, I think it's still how they market Mystère, is they say, it is the first one, and it is the kind of classic. I mean, it's funny now, they say it's the classic Cirque style. But what you're talking about, there is that structure still there, whereas the later productions from Soleil went into more esoteric, more abstract territory and lost some of that internal rhythm from the connection of the past, of the old of the traditional circus or whatever, right? Like we still find that structure inside there. And so the thing that we can dive into the team there.
Yeah, because this is really
But it comes from that LA. The LA risk of like we're going to lose.
Which show played then? Nouvelle Experience? Or?
No, before we reinvented Circus. Yeah,
okay,
I think.
Yeah,
and maybe it was. Yeah, I don't know. We can look that up, but it's maybe even the one before that. But it's before Nouvelle. That's what I wanted to say though. They go to LA. They take this risk. It pays off. So they're going to make a new show. And instead of, because I don't know about me personally, but like if I go to somewhere and I bet my entire existence. And it pays off and I kind of break through and I get a chance to make something else new, I would maybe not just take the whole risk again on the next new thing. I would maybe, just repeat myself. You know what I mean? I would be a little bit conservative, or I would hedge my bets, or I don't know. I wouldn't be so bold maybe because I just bet it all on, Red 32 and it paid off. And now I'm going to throw the dice again. And would you bet it all again? No, maybe you would be a little bit more hesitant, right? But no, when they did Nouvelle Experience, they went crazy. They went full out with all their ideas. They didn't hold back. They didn't kind of say, well, this in LA, we did this and this and this, so let's just keep that as our format. Yeah. And we'll just keep doing that with little incremental innovations, but more or less it's the same thing, maybe different costumes or something. No, with Nouvelle Experience, they're just like, what can we do now? Like, let's go to the moon, because now we broke through in LA. And they really got not an inflated ego, but they really took the pride of like, we succeeded in LA, and now we have the chance to make something new. So what do we want to make? And they took it seriously, and that's this core team of you have Michel Crete, again, the set designer. Franco Dragon, who's the director, Deborah Brown's choreographer, Luc Lafortaine, light design, Dominique Lemire, costume. She sadly passed away a couple weeks ago. And then you have like René Dupère or Benoit Jutras, who did the composition, the music. And it was kind of this little core team.
And they were basically, as much as circus always have, there has been music and there has been lights and there has been, but not in the way that they started to really take it on. By the time they came to Mystère, they were really wanting to make a Gesamtkunstwerk, where, like in opera, where Wagner and that way, where the story and the music and the building and the lights and everything was part. So and the ballet, so there was dancing and all the arts was now important.
I think they already started that back from the beginning of the company, and it was just that the more opportunity they had, the more they were able to manifest that vision. Yeah. And I think Nouvelle Experience, again, because they had the level of success in LA, they could even manifest it even more in Nouvelle Experience. But then when they were making this custom-built theater in Vegas. They could literally build the world out. They could build the world they were in. And that has always been kind of the hallmark of their shows, of this idea that we're going to build a world and transport you to a different world. And of course, many of their storylines, like Kidam, like we go in, like, you know, the main character, the girl falls into the different world. I mean, we've seen this all the time, this trope. But because they were building this custom built theater in Vegas, they could literally take the core ideas of the show and manifest them to the entire architecture. And these days we have in our world, in many different ways, this buzzword, immersive. Oh, I do immersive theater, which these days everybody's doing immersive theater, because that seems to be a buzzword that people think will sell in whatever different capacity. But just to say that Mystère theater was literally immersive, and it was maybe the first immersive experience I know of. That doesn't mean there weren't things before or parallel going on in the world, for sure. But and especially in terms of Circus, I mean, they literally built out the architecture of the space from the themes of the show, and you sit inside that theater. It could not be, in one way, more immersive in terms of the architecture. And then secondly, the staging or the choreography of Franco and Debbie Brown and stuff, of bringing the performers out into the audience literally, is also, I mean, literally immersive, and not just a buzzword or trendy figurative, metaphor. It actually was immersive. And so, again, just that they took this bold risk to not play it safe and just to do the same show in LA, but throw it in a theater in Vegas, but to say, no, now Steve Wynn's going to build this theater for us. And so what can we do that's like, and same thing for Michael Motion. Hey, Michael's going to make a piece for Cirque du Soleil. And instead of him just being like, oh, well, Cirque's a big company, I'm getting paid a lot of money, I better lock this down and make it good. He didn't, I mean, of course he said, I'm going to make it good, but he said, I'm going to make it good in the different way of saying, I'm going to take the biggest risk I can, and it's going to give me the biggest payoff I can have. And that's how it's going to be good. And so he made...
That's okay. Do you want some water?
Sorry, you have to edit that.
Yeah. Do you want to drink some water or something?
No, I'm good. So he made for me the best piece of juggling I've ever seen. So that piece that Michael Motion made for Mystère, it's the most iconic, it's the most expressive, surprising, amazing. I can't give enough superlative words to it. It's my favorite piece of juggling ever.
Give a couple of just a couple of images actually from it, just so we have some sort of little.
Absolutely. So basically, the main premise of the technique was, if you take a square sheet of metal, let's say a meter across, and you turn it so it looks like a diamond, right? You turn it, and then you curve it along the diagonal into an S shape.
Oh yeah.
And then you roll the ball on this curved piece of metal. That's the piece. But the piece was in many sections. So the first section was without the metal shapes, and it was 3 performers. It was Jean Bernard, Stephen Regatz, and Patrick Maguire. And they just started off with like small size rhythmic gymnastic balls, 1 each, doing contact juggling, from which Michael Motion, of course, made. And he made a choreography with 3 people. With this contact juggling stuff with these larger balls. And then there was a little interlude where Michael Motion used a bunch of sculptural forms of bent pieces of metal that the Green Lizard, who was played by Carl Bauman at the time from Moses Pendleton and Palobolis Company, which was also an amazing, they had 10 or 15 of these huge, 6 meter long, whatever, curved metal poles that they lined up and intersected, and then they would kind of rock them back and forth on the floor, and it looked like a physical representation of a wave, of like an ocean wave, which is, of course, then the next part of the piece is these curved pieces of metal that you roll balls on, that also is like ocean imagery. Though a lot of the imagery Michael was researching too also kind of went back to like Greek and Roman mythology and the Colosseum. And what did Pat tell me? Pat told me that him and Steve and Jean were the 3 stars in the belt of Orion.
Oh, okay.
That's what Michael had told them. You are the 3 stars in the belt of Orion. And just stuff like this, you know? And, but in case you're interested or anybody's interested, you can see that. You can see the act on YouTube.
Okay.
You can see. So
we'll have to put links in the show notes.
Sure. Yeah, there's a bunch of different versions of video now on
link
YouTube.
To the interview conversation.
Oh yeah, with Chris Angel
and Chris Angel, and also to this
this
particular
act. Yeah.
Because what's interesting here in a podcast that has previously with you and me explored the extreme limits of juggling, and you are famous for doing that. So when you do a gig in Holland, the people who book you go, there are people here who are really excited that you are here and that they just see you as the juggler, but
right.
The juggling community and the world who knows who you are, what you are and what you do, that you also explore these territories where some people look at it and go, I don't even know if it's juggling. So
imagine this. You're in Micromotion. You've been pursued by Soleil for years to be in their show. Finally, you come to some sort of behind-the-scenes business agreement. I don't know what that was, but it must have been heavy. I mean, major for him to sign up to be on board, finally. And you're this guy who made this triangle juggling thing and this crystal ball juggling thing.
Which is what they want, kind
yeah.
of. Yeah.
And instead of like, oh, let's get 3 triangles with 3 bounce jugglers in here. No, I'm going to research this thing I've never done before. I'm going to curve this piece of metal and try to roll a ball on it. And that's going to be the piece that I put on the stage in Vegas, which doesn't make any sense.
Millions of dollars is at stake, and you don't settle for something that is so unbelievably innovative and unique and iconic as the triangle is, and you don't just go that but to actually him as well going, if we're doing that, I'm taking it to the next level. And what is the next level? I don't know. But I think it has to do with rolling balls on pieces of metal. Yeah. Which to me, when you say it, you're going, right. You have a different kind of imagination than me, but he saw a whole dimension there.
It would be fun to talk to him more about it. I've talked to him a lot about it, but I wonder if part of it wasn't like, it could also be, I'm going to leverage the Cirque du Soleil opportunity to explore my limits, or like I have this idea, like let's just take the money and fund it. And maybe he didn't really care so much about the Cirque du Soleil angle or the commercial success or whatever. And there's a really fun story about that with the piece, which is that, so Steve Wynn, he's legally blind, so he doesn't see very well. And so he had spent however 35 million or whatever the final budget was on paying for this show. I mean, Guy La Liberté got Steve Wynn to fund the creation. Like, he bought the show and he built the theater. And so Steve is there on opening night to quote unquote see or to attend, because he's legally blind. He's attending the show and not seeing it so much. And after the opening Charivari, the opening scene of the show, this Charivari, and then Baby Francoise does the Red Ball act. But then the first real piece of the show, the first real major, production of the show, the act, is the Micromotion piece. It opens the show after Red Ball from Baby Francoise. And I have to say, obviously I saw that piece. That piece was only in the show for a couple years, then they moved it to Quidam, which is a whole other story. But when I saw the show in Mystère, I have to say that people were impressed by it. And I don't mean impressed as in like by the skill or something. I mean impressed as by the emotional effect of it. They were impressed in the greatest of ways of like,
they were moved.
They were moved.
Yeah.
It made an impression on them. And so, but the thing was, it was a 10 to 12 minute long piece. And it was mesmerizing and hypnotic. It was this wave rolling and circular and repetitive and this kind of trance-like movements. And so the audience was completely entranced. I mean, for real. But they weren't very vocal, or there wasn't a lot of clap. There wasn't a lot of sharp points of like you do your triple backflip and you're like hippa. It was just like this very hypnotic music and it draws you in, but it doesn't maybe make you exclaim or react vocally or clap a lot. And so Steve just got irate and was just like, what have you done? This is a disaster. I hear nothing. The show opens, and then it's just silence for 10 minutes, and this is a disaster, and we're going to lose all of our money, and this is like, this is a completely terrible. And it came to the point where after that show, him and Guy Laliberté almost came to blows outside the theater. They got in an argument, and Steve said, you have to fire those 3 people tonight. I don't want to end the show tomorrow. And so Steve Wynn and Guy Laliberté are arguing about this micro-motion piece. This is the night of the premiere, right? And Steve says, you have to fire them immediately. I don't want them in my show anymore. This is a disaster, and how could you dare do this to me? And this is, terrible. And Guy stood his ground, because Guy actually believed, well, there was two parts to it. Guy actually did believe in micro-motion, and he believed in the piece, but he also knew if he would cave in to this one moment to Steve, it would just never end, right? Like if Steve starts demanding things and Guy gives into it, it's just never going to end, right?
He will come in next week with some other idea that he has.
Exactly. And so Guy said, the act stays in the show, and if you don't want it in your show and you don't let it be in the show, we take everybody and go home. Like, we will leave, we will take the whole show away now. And of course Guy stood his ground and he won, but there was a kind of concession to the whole thing, which was that Steve then demanded there be more applause during the act. And so the way they solved it was they built in solos. So they each took a solo in the middle of the piece. And so that at the end of each solo, they could have an applause point. Yeah. And one thing I have to say about that micro-motion piece in Mystère is that the first, I'm going to say the pure
original concept,
the pure choreography. I saw Pat and Steve and Jean do a run through of that piece on the Mystère stage, wearing training clothes with no lights and no music, just in silence. I mean, I might start crying again thinking about that. Wow. Like, that was just there was something so pure about that core choreography and technique. And so then that had such a substance to it that when you built it out with the costume and the lights and Cirque du Soleil and Mystère and Vegas, it just, for me, got better. And I think that but there was a kernel of truth there somehow that I think that people in the audience could experience every night, even in this big Las Vegas production. I mean, Vegas is not the town for art.
Not the time for a 12-minute emotional
exploration
without applause. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then, but then of course, so that core, that rehearsal I saw that one day, burned in my brain, in my soul, and so that for me is the best piece of juggling I've ever seen. The piece with the solos in it, I mean, it's maybe the second best piece of juggling I've seen. I mean, it was still amazing.
But also for me, who is interested in the spectrum from art to entertainment, it's like they added a bit more entertainment value to an art piece. And it's amazing that they were allowed to, and that micro-motion allowed it, and or made that concession, and to also acknowledge the place where you're performing, the entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas. It's like to actually go, we make art, and maybe that first thing was the pure thing, but we need to take it from being an incredible conceptual contemporary classic piece to be a little bit more an element of pop music, by allowing the audience to be a little bit more participate actually loudly into it.
Yeah, and I don't know behind the scenes like how it actually shook out. Like, I don't know if at the end of the day how much the audience was digging the piece. I don't know how much adding the applause really helped out or detracted from anything. I think it really does come down to that power struggle between Steve Wynn and Guy Laliberté of just their egos butting up against each other. Because Steve Wynn is pretty famous anyway. Like, when Le Rêve opened at the Wynn Casino, you had friends who were in Le Rêve too, and they never had a day without rehearsal because Steve Wynn would just change the show every single day because it was his casino. And so there is that.
There's other shows in Vegas that I have been involved with as well where this is the case.
Right.
The producer or the owner or somebody comes in and has some new ideas. So there's a constant. But let's wrap it up as an episode here. But using this last bit has been just about one specific act where an example of an artist who's outstanding in their field, gets an opportunity to make an act, and who don't rest on their laurels of techniques they've created or stuff that has gotten them the gig, basically, but to go into the future with something new, into the unknown, and literally exploring something which, in your opinion, greatest juggling act that you've ever experienced. And that was just one small aspect of it, but it's also introduced the first proper act that was in the show, so it's a great way to kind of look at next chat about further for the rest of the show, like, because the space and all those other things. So thanks, that
Great.
was just absolutely amazing.
More to come.
More to come. All right. There will be 3 more episodes in the Mystère Obsession Explorations, and they will come out every Tuesday now this month. So prepare to go deep on Mystère and into the mind of Jay Gilligan. And if you do enjoy this, it would be awesome if you just right now just click subscribe on the podcast. Wherever you're listening to this right now, just click follow or click subscribe. It'll be really awesome. Best way to support it at the moment. So that's all I'm going to say for today. And apart from that, just take care of yourself and those you love. And I hope to see you along the way.